it's Aisha with 2 eyes, and I am so glad to finally be back here talking to you guys. I understand that it is the off season and it's a bit slow right now. It's kind of boring if I'm being 100% honest, but boring is good. We ain't got no craziness going on. Ain't hearing no players' names in the streets. I like it. Okay, so anyway, I wanted to get on here and touch base with you guys and finish up my second half of the video I made regarding what I think the current weaknesses of this team are right now. Now, as I discussed in a lot of those weaknesses, they have the potential to turn into strengths. However, we're projecting there, and we will be knowing a lot of these unknowns here this next couple of weeks with training camp, and I'm so excited. But I wanted to touch base with you guys and talk about some of the strengths of this team that I think exist, and a lot of them really are not like on the field related. I mean, they are, but I just feel like when we're discussing last season, the season before that, stuff like that, there are so many intricacies that I think are getting lost in translation, and I think we're doing this team a disjustice by not mentioning them when we're talking about what they could potentially be this year. So let's get into it. So I want to get into the defense. I think that this is going to be the strength of the team, at least to start. We saw this transition happen last year. I think a lot of people struggled with it because this time last year, we were expecting for the offense to be bomb.com and then for the defense to be subpar. And at some point in time, those roles switched. And I think what Dan Quinn did in coming in here last year, him, Joey Jr., Al Harris, I can't say his last name, Dirty, don't be mad at me. But the defensive line coach, these gentlemen coming together last year and being able to implement pretty much a whole new defense. And I guess a lot of the things schematically weren't new, but Dallas had a 60% turnover last year. Did you forget? I think a lot of people forget. I think a lot of people forgot that like our whole roster almost changed, and to include the coaching staff last year. And 2021 was, I'm not gonna say it was a surprise defensively because it was not for me, because I was really excited when I found out who they were bringing in for a coordinator and what I felt like they were gonna be doing. And then also the draft, because I saw that Dan Quinn had some pull, you know. But I just think some people still were down on what the defense was gonna do, and obviously they really outperformed what I think everyone's expectations were. With that being said, people were still down on the run stopping ability and also the deep passes, stuff like that. And when you start talking about the run stopping ability, I think a lot of things played a role in why the defense did not stop the run at a very high level for the majority of the season last year. And if we're being honest, I just think y'all forget that like your 3 best run stoppers were injured for the greater part of the season. What do you expect? And then you have rookies in there and they're playing multiple snaps. They're playing more snaps than what they were planning on, and then they're fatigued by the end of the season, and you see that in the playoffs. So you lost Tank, you lost Neville, you lost Brent Urban, who was specifically brought in to stop the run. You lost those guys early last year, and it showed defensively. And not only did you lose, I mean, losing a Tank is huge. Like that's, I mean, it's not something that you can just glaze over and act like it's not a big deal. He's one of the best edges at stopping the run. He's one of the best run stoppers in the league, and you lost him. Brent Urban, like, literally was one of the best run stoppers technically in the league, and you lost him. Neville Gallimore's whole role is to clog up the middle of that defense, and you lost him at the beginning of the season. And by the time these guys came back, they looked fresh for a couple games, but then you saw that they were not in game shape. And then you got fatigued rookies, and then you have a problem because the defensive line, what really helps you win games and in big games and playoff games is depth, fresh legs. Guys coming in when you need them to make a play and they're not tired because they've been on the field the whole time. So you need numbers, and I feel like this defensive line, when you start looking at the depth at edge, Basham, Ghost, and obviously Tank, Barnacles, Sam Williams. I mean, when you start looking at the depth there at edge in itself, and then you start going into the interior defensive line, I don't know if the depth is that great there. I mean, you do have Carlos Watkins, you have Bohanna, who we will see what we get from him this year. I hope his pad level is better. And then you have a John Ridgway, who I think is essentially a Brent Urban replacement, just younger and a little bit more crazy. and then obviously they're talking about moving Chauncey Golston to the inside. You have Osa Neville. You have some guys in the middle of this defense who are not only guys who can stop the run and take on double teams and do a lot of the dirty work for the edges so they can get busy and get to the quarterback, but you also have some guys. Sorry, I forgot Tristan. I forgot Tristan. I know a lot of people think that Tristan may not make it on this team, but with the way that Dan Quinn likes, again, like, he likes get off, he likes ferocity, he likes speed, I could see him possibly making the cut. Like, I'm just being honest with you, just for depth's sake, because guys went down on this defensive line really fast last year, and we saw how that hurt us defensively. Like, yeah, I can get to the quarterback and rush the passer, but we really are struggling with stopping the run. So I could see them being a little bit more DT heavy and keeping some of these guys around. But anyway, you also, you do have some talent in the middle of this defensive line now that can take on blocks, do a lot of the dirty work, and let the edges do what they need to do. But also with the defensive line, the better that the defensive line is, the easier it's going to be for those linebackers, because as it stands to me, the weak point of the defensive line, well, the defense is the linebacker core. And it's crazy because you would obviously we feel like Micah erases a lot of that issue, and I agree with you. But if he's not on the field, we have a little bit of I'm not gonna say inexperienced there, but we have a Leighton Vander Esch, and then we have a Darrell Cox, who is, again, we're hoping that he comes back and he is ready to take on that role, being next to Micah, but we don't know that yet. So, and obviously the depth at linebacker is shaky. It's shaky. Now, I do think that the way that Dan Quinn uses the nickel, the big nickel, sometimes the dime with the safeties, is going to benefit the thin linebacker room, but there are levels to this. Like, the better your pass rush is, the easier it is for your secondary. The better your defensive line, it's easier for your linebackers not having to get off of guards and being climbed on. So we would like for these guys to play free, and I'm hoping that they have the ability to do that. You did see Leighton Vander Esch come on a little stronger in the later part of the season, because you could see that the gentleman wasn't having to get off blocks, and we already know that's not his strong suit at this part in his career. So, and then we get to the secondary. If we roll out the same guys, I'm cool with it. Listen, it took me a minute. I really want to see Kelvin Joseph succeed. I really want to see Nashawn Wright succeed. I want to see them play well. However, this is a prove me camp. Prove it to me camp. Like, there's a lot of gentlemen coming into this camp that are going to have to show what their place is on this team. Because one thing I will say about this team and this coaching staff, they're not afraid of playing young. They're not. And they're not afraid of putting the better guy on the field, even if it is for a little bit, just for you to switch him back out. But you know what I mean. All in all, I feel like the defense has an identity right now. They have a set identity. They do specific things well. We've discussed numerous times that we can definitely expect to see the turnover numbers go down. But if the turnover numbers go down and the run defense is better, I don't care. I call that fair. I call that fair. Again, I do think the defense is going to be exciting this year, and it's my number one strength right now of this team. And let's get into number two, and that's just my quarterback, bro. Number two for me is my quarterback. Number four, him being on the field and being active as he's been a different type of active. I think, again, this is something that gets lost in translation and people don't talk about, is the off season that Dak Prescott had going into the 2021 year. Obviously, from the injury, having multiple surgeries, also dealing with the loss of his brother, that emotionally wears on you. And I think that sometimes we forget that these players are human, and that they go through these things, and then factor in him dealing with the shoulder and then the calf. And it was just you could tell last year was emotionally heavy for him. And I'm not gonna lie, I was at the playoff game. I saw it. And when they lost, he looked sad, but part of him to me felt like he was relieved to get a break and to rejuvenate himself and to take care of himself. Like, I don't know how y'all do it, but I'm player first. Dak Prescott's probably the first quarterback that I've gotten the opportunity to really follow and see his growth and see what his story has been and what he's been through. And he's just one of those guys that he's very difficult to count out. But when he's not in the locker room, or when he's not around, or when he's not 100%, you can tell that it affects these players, and they follow him. He is a leader. And listening to, again, do yourself a favor and watch these player interviews. Watch the language. Listen to how they talk about each other. These young players think a lot of Dak, and you can tell how much influence he's had on them early. It's a collective thing, but him specifically being in the locker room early, getting with these young receivers, getting with these new receivers, and working with them outside of the rookie mini camps and stuff like that. I personally think it would be crazy to not think that him being on the field is not, and healthy on the field, is not going to help things be better for this team. And then I think this also trickles down to the offensive line. It's a unit, and like, even though the quarterback isn't directly a part of the offensive line, his communication and him being on the field, I mean, from the hand signals to the way he grunts during his cadence, I mean, these offensive linemen need to know him and know him in depth. And if you listen to the Tyler Biotish, if you listen to Tyler Smith, these guys are they sound ready to protect him and to do right by him, because it's also an effort thing when you're talking about protecting the quarterback and doing what you need to do for him. And I just think a lot of the struggles offensively last year had to do with his injuries, the offensive line play being poor, but I also think a lot of the communication was bad on the offense, and I think some of that can be mediated with him being in the locker room. Him already taking to Jalen Tolbert is huge for us, because we know how big of a deal like he is to this offense and their success until Michael Gallup comes back. And I just, I'm not gonna go on and ramble, but I really want people to hone in and understand how big of a difference it is having him on this field. Like I said, I think people forget, like, the man did like 2 full practices last year in training camp, and then we didn't get to see him until he came out guns blazing against the Bucks. I mean, just come on now. Come on now, like, what more do you want? And then the discussion of him running more has come up. He's been very vocal about being mobile again, and I can't tell y'all how excited I am about that, because again, I've watched Dak, and I understand that his running ability, and again, it don't gotta be fancy. He ain't gotta be sitting up here doing Lamar Jackson stuff, but just the threat of it, I bet you teams get out of that too high shell. I bet you if he uses his legs, they get out of that too high shell. It's just the respect of his legs, and you could tell that not only the defenses lose the respect for that last year, they lost the respect for the run game in general. And that hurt us. So him being healthy, mobile, vocal, being the leader that he is, being on the field, is always going to be a plus to this team. And I think that that's the strength of this team absolutely right now, having 4 on the field. Okay, and last but not least, I want to talk about time. And I think that, again, like, these are just the things that I think are important to a football team to succeed, and what I think are valuable things going into this training camp, and the time that these gentlemen are spending with each other, working outside of camp, the time that these gentlemen are spending working with specialty position coaches, like, or position teachers like a Duke, like these offensive linemen, Tyler Smith, Terrence Steele, getting that extra work, guys talking about being on the Dak yard. I mean, that time together means something when you want your team to be successful. It means something when guys like each other and want to be around each other. When you talk about how young this locker room is, even the old guys are kind of young, right? So them coming together and taking these young players under their wing and really trying to hone in on that chemistry, that team chemistry, it matters to me going into camp. And then also when you start discussing time We talk about Kellen Moore going into his third year. We have been going through a lot of the growing pains with him. And I personally think that a lot of the growing pains that we went through with Kellen Moore last year, we probably would have seen in 2020 had Dak Prescott not gotten hurt. Dak Prescott got hurt and completely altered the way that the offense was completely run, you know. So I hope to see him take that next step with time and experience. And again, still discussing time. This is Mike McCarthy's third year, and this is typically when head coaches come into their own and really implement what they want. And this is something we saw in the off season. We saw it with OTAs and stuff. He has a certain way of doing things, and it seems as though the players have responded well to it. I mean, it's just something to be said. People always talk about Dallas, and they're not really being like what is the word I'm looking for? There it is. Culture. Him implementing a new culture here and just a new way of doing things. And this is really the only off season he's really had to do that in totality. And let's just see if it does diligence, man. Like, let's see if time is on our side when you're talking about these second, third year players. What are we gonna get from them? And then also, what are we gonna get from this young offensive coordinator who needed a little bit more time? What are we gonna get from this head coach who now, to me, has had a little bit more time to get more involved in what we need to see from a head coach and all this good stuff? And then also, what are we gonna see from these players taking the time to get better, to take time to be with each other and build chemistry and really build that rapport with each other? What are we gonna see? What happens off the field shows, and you can tell during the season whose locker room has a steady foundation. And it seems as though they have really been working to build that since Mike McCarthy came in, and it's been some tough decisions, there's been some crazy cuts. I mean, like I said, 60% turnover last year in our roster. We lost a lot of guys this offseason, and that's kind of been a trend. So with this being it, this is year 3, what are we gonna get with this time? Yeah, so again, those are my 3 strengths of this team right now: time, Dak Prescott, and the defense as a whole. And let's see what we get. You guys like, subscribe, comment. You already know I am very conversational here. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm not trying to do that. That's exhausting. I really want to bring a more in-depth, caring conversation to the game and objective conversation to the game. So yeah, I hope you guys are messing with it. I hope you guys like it, and training camp is about to be lit. I'll see y'all.